I want you to start thinking about insulin resistance and even diabetes as something that your body is simply performing the way you've taught it to perform. Now, what does that actually mean? That means that you've been eating a particular diet and having, your life a little bit imbalanced along with that, to the point where your body can simply only react the way that it's reacting. And when you go in for a simple blood test that shows that your blood sugar is a certain level resting in the morning, then you're going to get put on a drug for diabetes. Doesn't really mean you have it, just means you got to adjust your diet. You could simply say to the doctor, and this is happening all over Europe now, you could simply say to the doctor, why don't you give me 6 weeks and I'll come back, right? In Europe now, that's becoming standard where they just tell you, you have to change your diet and exercise a little bit and come back in 6 weeks, we'll see where you're at, because you can take care of this. And it's the truth, because when you're in that phase of 104 to 110, you're really just experiencing insulin resistance, meaning that your cells are no longer responding to the signal from insulin to take up the sugar that you have in your bloodstream. So that's called insulin resistance. Your cells are resisting the signal to take that up, and so too much of it stays in your bloodstream. And what does that do? It causes inflammation, which then messes up the levels of cholesterol in your body, which then creates more inflammation in your arteries, which leads to hypertension, heart disease, could lead to Alzheimer's, dementia, because any inflammation you have anywhere in your body that becomes excessive, the same condition will end up in your brain. So all these things are a trigger, and it all goes back to insulin resistance. So why are your cells responding that way to insulin? It's because you've had a diet that just spikes it way too often, and so they're always getting this signal, and after a while they don't pay attention to it. And also because of your stress levels. Stress puts you into a position to where your blood sugar is naturally elevated all the time, and then when you add too much sugar from your diet to that, then you're in low insulin levels, because, by the way, when you're stressed, your body doesn't produce insulin in the amount you need to actually deal with your elevated blood sugar. It's a natural response that your body has to stress. And this is probably really adding to the whole syndrome that you have going on. And think about it this way. When you look at stress, right, what is your body trying to do? It's trying to prepare you for a fight or a flight. That's why it's called fight or flight, meaning you're either going to duel to the death with someone, and originally it was probably a wild animal, or you're going to run away. Both of those require a lot of energy. So when you have that stress response, your body is basically signaling your adrenals to release a bunch of adrenaline, so it peaks your brain and it gets your muscles primed, but it also has your liver just flood the body with stored glycogen or sugar, because you're going to need a lot of that sugar to actually burn up while you're fighting and running away. You need massive amounts of it, so you're just flooded. And at the same time, it shuts off your insulin response, because you don't want insulin clearing that all out of your body if you need it to fight or run away. It's just a normal response that your physical body has. So the problem with that response, though, is that normally we have that stress response now just because of emotional issues. When it originated, it was, we really didn't have that many emotional issues. The brain wasn't set up to have that much. It was a very simple mechanism by which you were protecting yourself from the environment. Well, we still have that same stress response, only today it's triggered more by things that upset us emotionally, whether it's a loved one or one of your kids, or just being stuck in traffic, somebody flips you off when you're driving, your boss looks at you wrong, you have a stress response. Let's say you don't even want to go to work that day. You have a stress response just waking up, right? So you have a mild stress response. You're already waking up and your sugar's elevated and your insulin's not working too well, and you go down to the kitchen and you have a piece of toast, which is a simple carbohydrate with a bunch of jam on it because you want to get a sugar rush, and maybe some coffee with a bunch of sugar in it. And all of a sudden, your sugar is just skyrocketing, and yet you're stressed, and so it's not going to clear out of your system. And so your cells don't have the ability to even take it in because there's not much insulin signaling it. And so you could see how the stress just adds to everything that's going on in your system. And then if you don't have a plan, let's say you don't have a diet by which that you know is really nutritious for you and doesn't spike your blood sugar itself, then you're just adding to this whole syndrome all day long, because you know what? You're going to be stressed out 4 times before lunch. You're going to be stressed out 4 more times at least in the afternoon before you come home from work, right? And so if you don't have a plan by which, 1, to deal with your stress, and 2, to deal with your diet, because your diet is really extremely important during times of stress, but it's also the one thing no one pays attention to under stress. So you have to have a plan when you leave the house or every single day of what you're actually going to eat in response to your diet and your amount of stress in your life. And it shouldn't be just a diet set up because of the amount of stress. It should be a diet that's set up to just make you thrive, not just stay alive, but to thrive, that makes you feel the best you can possibly feel. Because if you're feeling that way, you won't get stressed as easily, and you won't reach for something to change the way you feel. This is one of the things that happens to everyone when they become stressed. They eat to change the way they feel. What are the 4 most common things that they grab to change the way they feel? Sugar, number 1. Worst thing for diabetics. Actually, worst thing for anybody to grab. But it instantly changes the way you feel. Alcohol does the same exact thing. Alcohol turns to sugar instantly, changes the way you feel immediately. Pharmaceutical drugs or recreational drugs change the way you feel immediately, and smoking. They all change your chemistry immediately and change the way you feel. The best thing that you can do is set yourself up on a lifestyle, a plan to deal with stress and to deal with your food issues before it actually happens, so that you don't really ever have to change the way you feel that much. Because if you don't have the wild variations in how you're feeling, you stabilize everything, then you don't fall into those patterns and are grabbing things all the time out of craving to change the way that you feel. It's probably the most important thing you can do if you have a high stress life and you're kind of losing control. People don't think about their diet, but it's one thing that you have control over. And usually when you have high stress, it's great to know that you have control over 1 or 2 things. That just makes you feel, good. It makes you feel like you are in control of part of your life, and your diet is something that you can set up on your own. So you want to be able to deal with stress, and you want to set up a good diet. Now, stress is something that we all know there's certain things you can do, like meditation. There's breathing exercises you can do. Just sitting down and taking 10 deep breaths without any even plan involved with it starts to shut off your stress response. When they used to tell you if you're going to get really angry, somebody upsets you, count to 10 before you say anything. Well, actually, the best way is just to take 10 slow, deep breaths, because if you do that, your body will actually start to shut off the stress response and go into what they call parasympathetic nervous system, which means you're more present and you're actually thinking. It takes you out of that lower part of your brain and up into a higher part of your brain where you actually can see the bigger picture and respond to your life instead of just reacting to your life. You want to become a human being that can respond to things that are going on and not just react to what's going on. Because if you're just reacting all day long, then you're down in the lower part of your brain that's just fight or flight, and you're just wasting your energy. Your body is using so much energy just to stay on an even keel that you're not putting any energy back into your body or storing any for future use. And that's a really bad situation to be in. In Chinese medicine, this is really the crux of what Chinese medicine is about, especially Chinese tonic herbalism, which is what I do and what I've practiced for years, actually decades. Is the idea is all about conserving your energy. And the main way you lose your energy is through stress. So if you can learn how to become responsive to life instead of reactive, what happens is you're eating good food, your body actually turns that into energy. And at the end of the day, if you have some left over, it actually stores it back in your glandular system. Something they call jing, right? Is a Chinese word for your glandular system. Well, if you eat really well and you get a curb on your emotions, you get a handle on what's going on, then that energy can actually be stored and used for later on in your life for an emergency. That's how, stress is supposed to be. It's an emergency situation. But our bodies get locked into thinking it's an emergency situation all the time, just like with the stress response in your blood sugar, because you're always elevating your blood sugar because of stress and your diet, then your body starts to think that's a normal situation, and it starts to even produce less insulin just because it's become so normal for you, right? Your body learns things on its own like that, responses to things. And so after a while, you just don't produce as much insulin as normal because not only are you stressed all the time, but you always have elevated blood sugar, and it becomes a pattern. And you have to be able to break that pattern with your diet, just like you want to break your emotional stress patterns and become someone that responds instead of just reacts. So Chinese medicine is all about that, and especially Chinese tonic herbalism. The first thing I learned in that was conserving your energy, but also dealing with your stress was the best thing that you could do, so your body has its own innate ability to go back into what they call homeostasis and repair itself. And part of that whole process, if your body's going back into a natural, relaxed mode and homeostasis kicks in, it's real easy for your body to then clear out excessive blood sugar and start to regulate everything, because it is just a normal part of homeostasis. And so, but you have to be able to allow it to do that by not compromising everything with your diet. And so in Chinese medicine, they have all kinds of herbs, especially though adaptogenic herbs, that are actually good for helping your body go into homeostasis. And yet all those herbs have secondary effects that are really good for things like diabetes or excessive blood sugar. And so you have things like reishi mushroom, which is one of my favorite herbs. Reishi mushroom is an adaptogen, so it allows you to relax your nervous system, and so, but it also especially affects the frontal lobe of your brain and your whole glandular system. It is one of those few herbs that actually has an effect on your pituitary, your thyroid, your adrenals. So it's a very balancing herb to your whole system. But on the other side of that, it actually makes your liver healthier, so you have better control over not only your emotions, but you have better control over releasing blood sugar, holding on to toxins, all these different things, because your liver is actually healthier, and it actually controls blood fat. So it has a slight effect on cholesterol levels, all different types of things that come into play when you have excessive blood sugar. Because if you have excessive levels of fat in your blood, then and excessive levels of sugar, this is one of the things that happens when you're pre-diabetic or insulin resistant. It's a common thing that happens with your diet. Then that has a tendency to cause more inflammation. So down the road, an herb like reishi mushroom, is one of my favorite herbs, and I use it in almost all my stress formulas, has all these different layered effects in your body. Another one like rhodiola, which is one of the great adaptogenic herbs you can take. Rhodiola deals with inflammation in your liver, but it also deals with a really specific aspect of helping your blood sugar, in the fact that if you take rhodiola, say an hour before you exercise, your body will actually burn all the fat that you release when you're exercising at a much higher rate than it normally would. So it helps your body to actually utilize or pull this energy out of your bloodstream and burn it up. I think it increases your efficiency of burning fatty acids by about 44%. Now, you might wonder what that fatty acid has to do with blood sugar, but that's what your body actually does with blood sugar when it's functioning well and trying to put it into your cells, right? It turns it into fat, and it's stored into your cells. This is why you might be gaining weight when you're eating too much and it's turning into blood sugar and your body's processing it and storing it into your cells because it stores it as fat. And triglycerides, you've all heard probably of you having your triglycerides are too high. Well, those are fatty acids that your body has changed that can't store them in your cells because of insulin resistance. So it's all interrelated, all these different aspects of imbalance, yet all of it will clear up on its own and go away if you start to deal with your stress and deal with your diet. It's not something that you have to just say, I'm going to work on my triglycerides, I'm going to work on this. No, it all just comes back into play when you change your diet. There's research out now that shows that just through simple lifestyle changes of dealing with stress, not smoking, exercising, and a change of diet lowers your chance of getting diabetes by 81%. Think about that, 81%. There's no drug on the market that helps you 81% of the time. It's an unbelievable statistic, but the best part of it is you can do it all on your own. And that's, what I want you to take out of this call. Everything that we're talking about tonight, you can do on your own, right? Even green tea. If you look at, all my stress products, I put green tea in it. Why is that? Because green tea is a very powerful antioxidant. So it deals with inflammation in your brain. It deals with inflammation in your arteries. Generally, all over your body, your liver, anywhere where you have inflammation, the antioxidants in green tea tend to have an effect on your entire system and the type of inflammation you have. But the particular one I actually use is one of the few that's ever been put through a clinical trial that shows that it helps people to lose weight. In fact, the trial that they put it through showed that people on that particular green tea, on the same exact diet, lost 3 or 4 times as much weight as the people that they didn't give that green tea to. So it helps with your metabolism and the way that your body actually restores its own ability to burn up the amount of calories that you're actually consuming. So all these things are important, and all these herbs work really well to curb your stress, which then brings your stress response back into a normal range. Because, there's nothing wrong with having a stress response. Nothing at all. In fact, it's one of the most important things that your body can ever have is to have proper, healthy stress response. The problem is that because we get locked into it, it becomes chronic, and then we lose the feedback loop, which tells our body to shut it off. And this is what's so important about adaptogenic herbs and taking stress formulas that are based on adaptogenic herbs, is that it allows the feedback mechanism, the feedback loop, to engage. So you go into your stress, you come back out of it, your body starts releasing the chemicals, which brings you back into normal, and everything goes back to a set state. The other great thing about particular herbs, especially herbs like reishi mushroom, rhodiola, ashwagandha, is that they tend to work on very strongly on your pituitary and the energy center associated with that. And what that means energetically is that you tend to reside in a part of your brain for longer periods of the day, say your frontal lobe, which is really all about creativity, your imagination, focus, planning. And when you're up in that area of your brain, it's harder for you to just drop down and stay in the lower part of your brain where you just initiate the stress response. So what you're creating is an environment where you can have a healthy stress response and then get out of it and start to heal, but you're also residing in a part of your brain where you're more focused and you're more able to be imaginative and see the bigger picture. And it's actually a much more fun place to be. And so you're a more fun person, and you're in a little bit better mood because you're dwelling up in possibilities more often. And that alone allows you to see the things in your life differently, so you don't just fall into reacting to them. You now become the person who responds to stuff and responds to it appropriately because you've been able to transform the energy in your brain up to a different area, and you start to focus on that. And just like the learned behavior of having too much sugar all the time and not enough insulin teaches your body to kind of stay in that, when you can focus up in the imaginative, fun area of your brain more often, your brain starts to just get into a habit of staying there. And it's harder for it to just drop down into the stress response. And that's really, the fun part of taking great herbs and handling your stress, because you're training yourself to actually just be more fun and to be more outgoing and to see the bigger picture. And what's better than that? Try to not think of stress as just lowering stress hormones. Try to think of it as life-changing, transcending your normal behavior and moving up into where your whole life can subtly change, and you'll be looking back on 6 months from now and going, wow, I can't even believe I was like that, or I responded like that, because I've changed so much just because I became aware of all these different avenues by which I could engage my stress and change my diet. So that's probably the best way to start to deal with diabetes. You're dealing with your stress, and now you're looking at changing your diet. And then I'm going to get into now just telling you what's the easiest 5 things you can do to really just change things around to make sure that you're going to move out of this pre-diabetic or even diabetic phase. Believe me, I've talked to hundreds of people who have just put in simple steps into their diet, and within months, and some of them within 30 days, have gone off 3 or 4 different drugs they were on for not only diabetes, but for high blood pressure, all based on their diet. And why was that? Because their body was simply reacting to what they were putting in it and their emotional state at the same time. And when they changed them both, the body just started reacting normally. And I tell you, so many people that have diabetes fall into this category. They're simply having a body that they've trained to react that way, and a diet that has trained it to react that way. And when they change it, it just reacts normally. And anybody out there on this call can do that. And if you're one of those 10% or maybe 20% of people that really have an imbalance called diabetes, then even those people can probably reduce their dependence on outside things by a huge margin. In fact, there's studies that show just by going on a diet and losing 20 pounds and restricting your calories to a certain level, that even people on insulin for 20 years have gone off of it. Now think about that. If that's actually possible, and that was done in a clinical study, then is diabetes truly a disease for most people that have it? Or is it because of our stress and our diet, and the diet puts more stress on you? We've just trained ourselves to react that way. So number 1 of all the things you need to do, obviously, is deal with your stress. Find something that helps you deal with your stress, not only a product you can take, like, obviously I make Tianchi and I make Inner Peace. They're both stress products. They work really well for that. But find a program you can go on that helps you with your stress. Learn some breathing techniques. Learn how to meditate. Meditation is just a word from the Far East that basically is their way of sitting down and saying you're praying and being quiet for a while. It allows your mind to recalibrate and to go out of the stress response. It also is just a way that you're telling yourself you're going to spend some time with yourself. So find a way to deal with your stress, number 1 thing. Next, you have to make a commitment to change your diet. You have to be able to sit down and go, I'm going to get on a plan of foods that are beneficial for me, that actually build my health and allow me to thrive and don't elevate or jack up my blood sugar to a dangerous level. Because if it goes up 30 or 40 points when you've had a meal, you've gone up to a dangerous level that triggers heart attacks, triggers strokes. All these things can happen with one simple meal that has way too much food that you metabolize too quickly, and it turns into sugar. So make a commitment to change your diet. and make a commitment to stay on that diet no matter what's going on. And a lot of times that means just getting rid of food that you have in your house that you know is bad, that triggers sugar spikes. Just get rid of it, because if it's around and you're highly stressed, you're probably going to fall into a pattern of grabbing it. You have to make the commitment and then change the food that you have available to you so you're always into that plan. And believe me, it really only takes 10 days to actually change your diet and to change your brain's response to your food to where you no longer crave things that are bad for you. And that's my next point, number 3, is basically some tips on how to actually change your diet, because it's so important when you're looking at insulin resistance. The number 3 is you want to make your breakfast a protein meal that turns your body into a fat-burning machine. Now, why do you want to do that, right? Well, protein and protein deficiency is one of the reasons why you crave sugar in the first place. Everybody with diabetes, pre-diabetes, any of these conditions you call that fall into that category, insulin resistant, usually has a problem with sugar. It's the number one thing you crave and you try to grab when you're actually stressed or when you think you want to change the way you feel, right? So you have to deal with that. But it's normally just considered a protein deficiency. Now, you might be saying, well, everybody eats enough protein, and that's true. America is a country where very few people eat too little protein. But the thing you don't realize is that it's the timing of the protein that changes the way your brain operates, and it changes your response to it. So let's say you're someone with elevated blood sugar and you're always in this pattern of having elevated blood sugar and stress response. The best way to get out of that is to wake up and for 10 days make a commitment. You're going to have a protein breakfast. And usually for most people that are really imbalanced, it's almost good to go out and get a protein powder. One that's based on pea protein is my favorite. It's really beneficial to your kidneys, which are involved in sugar regulation, which also become weak when your blood sugar is way too high. A type of pea protein. But really, if you don't want to do that, even sitting down to a chicken breast first thing in the morning and having nothing else for breakfast, just for this 10-day area, is how you're going to start regulating the amount of sugar in your bloodstream. So let's say you sit down and you do that. Doesn't matter if it's a drink or it's protein from chicken breast. You do that, and the next time you get hungry, it might be an hour because there wasn't a lot of calories. It might be 3 hours. But the next time you eat, just have some protein and whatever vegetables you want to eat. Try to eat more of the low glycemic, but it's not that important at this initial stage, because if you're eating a lot of vegetables, you're not going to eat that much of really high glycemic. If you're eating a mix, it's all going to kind of even itself out. Just make the commitment, protein breakfast, next meal, protein and all the vegetables you want. Eat that way the rest of the day. Don't look at it as losing weight. Look at it as training your brain and regulating your sugar. Because when you eat protein the very first meal, you're actually allowing your body to take an amino acid called tyrosine out of that food, send it up to your brain to create dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that powers up your brain, but also it's the one that makes you have more pleasurable experiences, and it's the one that shuts off your craving for sugar. It won't happen with one meal, but after 3 or 4 days, believe me, you'll start to notice you don't think about cookies all the time. You're not thinking about sugar all the time because your brain has started to change in that little period of time. I know this for a fact. I actually put tyrosine in my Tianchi for the very same effect. Tyrosine is what you take out of a protein food. I added in for those people that drink my drink first thing in the morning because it helps set their brain up to have more power and to actually make more dopamine, and it helps them to get a handle on different cravings that they have in their life. So that's number 3, protein breakfast. Make a commitment, to stay on that for 10 days and eat all the vegetables you want. And then number 4, which people really don't like to hear this one, but it doesn't have to be what you do all the time, but you really want to just eliminate fruit. And this is a tough one because people don't realize, like how much sugar is in fruit. But this whole diet to deal with your stress and your amount of, in your pre-diabetes is really centered around lowering your blood sugar and getting rid of cravings for sugar. Fruit is just almost all the calories from it comes from sugar, and the people usually are eating types of fruit that don't have much beneficial nutrition in it anyway. Bananas, apples, and grapes are usually what people are eating. Have very high levels of sugar, and even though there are some benefits to all those foods, you won't miss it for 10 days. It'll allow you to actually get into a state that you want to get into much faster just by eliminating them for 10 days. And then after that, add some in the afternoon. Don't have them for breakfast, because we're already in that. We're trying to change that pattern of having jam and toast and sugar in our coffee for breakfast, right? You just, you want to get out of that pattern, so just eliminate fruit for 10 days. Work it back into your diet after you've gotten control and you've regulated your blood sugar. Find ones that are really highly nutritious for you and you get the most health benefits out of it, and reincorporate that back into your diet. It's the same way with the next step is eliminate grains. You want to eliminate grains in this 10 days because it'll help you accelerate the speed by which you get rid of excessive blood sugar. Because if you do all these things, in grains, the problem with grains is people eat a lot of bread. That turns into sugar really quickly, and then that allows your body, it just makes it harder for your body to regulate itself. So just kind of eliminate it. Look at this 10-day commitment as I'm going to change my entire life, not just my diet. And you will. It'll happen in 10 days. And you change this to where I'm going to, as quickly as possible, get a handle on my blood sugar. And the easiest way to do that is to eliminate grains. And again, just like the fruit, add it back in after a while and see how it affects you. If it affects you negatively, then you need to stay off of it for a longer period of time. But the goal here, again, is not to lose weight, is to regulate your blood sugar and allow your body to start the healing process. And what happens here, and why I said this in the beginning, that you want to turn into a fat-burning machine, is because once you go on the protein and you eliminate the easy ways to make sugar, which is grains and fruit, and you're eating this diet of vegetables and protein, your body wants a little extra energy. It just starts dumping out all this stored energy from your cells, these fatty acids, and you just start burning it. That's why I said you're going to become a fat-burning machine, because if you do this right, you're going to start having all your cells release all this stored energy. And that's the process by which you're now going to be no longer be insulin resistant. Because if your cells have room to store this energy, then they start responding to insulin and taking it out of your bloodstream in a normal way that's beneficial for your health. And if you're on the right diet, you won't be producing so much and storing so much that you actually gain weight. I've talked to a lot of people with this imbalance, and a lot of them will say, well, I take all these products and I do this, and it never seems to help. But then they admit there's always that 10 or 15 pounds around their waist that they never dealt with. And that's the issue, is why they're not actually responding to the products they take, because their cells have never gone through this process by which they release all this excessive energy. That's what you want to do. If you're on a diet like this, and you're working on your blood sugar, and all of a sudden one day you feel really tired, it's probably a sign you need to just eat some more vegetables, because you didn't eat enough to keep your sugar up just a little bit to where it's running, you have enough energy to get through your day. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want to become too restrictive, you're just training your body into a different process. So if you end up really tired, you just need to eat a little bit, and you'll probably feel completely different. And the last one you want to do is exercise, because that will accelerate your body's need to release this stored energy, and it'll come out into your system more rapidly. And then if you're taking the herbs I told you about, you'll actually burn it up quicker anyway. So all of this kind of comes together at the end with a little bit of exercise. And I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that strenuous. You can get out and walk for 30 minutes. If you don't have any reason to get out and walk, maybe you need to adopt a dog. That's the way I get out of my house and walk every day. And so you can go out and walk for 30 minutes. Not only does it move your body and start the healing process to where you're using up some energy, but just being out in nature relaxes your nervous system. No matter what you're doing, just breathing fresh air, seeing trees, being out anywhere where, outside of your normal routine causes your nervous system to just relax. Your whole body loves it. So that's probably the easiest way to just start the process to heal from diabetes. It doesn't matter if you have diabetes or you're just pre-diabetic, insulin resistant, or just want to clean up your health. This is the easiest way to do it. And it's really something, what I love about this process is that you're doing it for yourself. You don't need a pill to help you do this. It's something you can do on your own, and it's probably a lifestyle change that has the greatest benefits for you, not only for this, but almost any chronic ailment. So, Zach, I'm going to stop it there and open it up for questions.
Roger, it's awesome. As you're talking, I'm thinking about all the people that need to hear this, and I actually shared it with a few right now as we're talking. I'm sending them the call-in number and letting them know that's going to be available on iTunes in a couple of days. I've learned a lot from you tonight. There's things that you've told me over the years, and the alcohol and the eating the sugars in the morning, definitely screw me up. And I know that TNC has helped alleviate quite a bit of that, as far as cravings and so forth throughout the day, which contains most of the herbs that you talked about tonight. But we're going to open this up for Q&A. Let me just take it off a recording real quick. Okay, our first caller is calling in from area code 803, ending in 1607.
Hi, my name is Debbie, and my husband was diagnosed about 5.5 weeks ago with pre-diabetes, but from listening to you, I would say it was probably a worse case than that. He did not have his blood sugar taken until late in the afternoon, so it was an inaccurate reading according to the doctor, but it was 590 that day. And we have really radically changed his diet, and he's down to 137, 138. He does check it with a meter. He was prescribed a product, but he has not taken it. He's just been doing the diet and some
what
herbs
was he
and
prescribed?
Vitamins. The metformin.
Well, actually, I rarely tell anybody to go on drugs, but metformin is probably the healthiest drug that he would ever take for regulating his blood sugar.
Right.
So it's not going to be that. He I'm not saying he goes on it, but if he had to take one, he might find it that if he takes it for a little while, it'll get it down to a really good spot, and it'll be easier for his diet then to kick in and keep it down that way. So don't just I always tell people, don't just think you can't take any medicines, but metformin is one of the better ones. And so
well, he had noticed that it made his stomach hurt a lot when he first started taking it, but he can try it again. He can try it again.
All right, well, he doesn't have to. I'll tell you, your husband's doing an amazing job. And I wanted to tell you, the diet can radically change it. My wife once flew out to see her father because he was feeling terrible, and he's diabetic, right? And his blood sugar was around 600.
Right.
And it was all because of the way he was eating. She made food for him for 3 days, and he woke up 3 or 4 days later, it was 110.
Wow.
That's how radically it changed just from different food. So I think if you've already lowered your husband's blood sugar 370 points, it sounds like, right? Somewhere around there.
Right.
Diet, there's probably just a couple things he needs to incorporate, and it'll just drop down to normal. A little more exercise, maybe just a
he's
little
doing no exercise.
Food.
I think that's a possibility and we have not eliminated fruit. We have fruit in his green smoothie every morning. That's how we start the day, is a green smoothie with his fruit in it. And we have not eliminated the fruit, so we need to do that.
Yeah.
We have eliminated the grain, and he's responded. Lots of, he's got energy. He feels good, but we've been under a lot of stress as a family for the past year. And if we had to do one of the two products, because we cannot afford, we're retired, to do both of them, but if we had to do Inner Peace or the Tianchi, which one would you recommend for the stress to help with this condition?
I would recommend the Tianchi to start with.
Okay.
Because there's a lot more of the herbs in it that you actually need. It's taking a dose of Tianchi is probably 4 times as much herb as taking a dose of Inner Peace. So you're getting higher levels. But there's also a lot of things in it that help your brain in Tianchi to function properly, to help you to focus, to feel differently. And that little bit of feeling differently makes it easier for you to do all the other things. Okay. You know what I mean? So even if you just did a month of it, it would be very positive for him. Clean up the fruit out of his drink. It might be the thing that'll drop him right down to 100. Make sure his drink is more focused on protein and some fats and not the other thing.
Yeah, I have been focusing not on the protein in the drink, but mostly on the vegetables, the green. So I add a green powder as well as I do spinach and kale in there. But I put the fruit in there just for the taste of it because he wasn't a person who did those kinds of things, and I was afraid he'd rebel against it. But he's done very well with it. But I will switch it up to I'll use the pea protein.
More of a protein fix. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Next caller is calling in from area code 702, ending in 9976.
Hey, Zach. Rogers Josiah, functional medicine practitioner. How are you guys doing?
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hey, excellent. Great call, guys. Thought I would get on, and fantastic information. Again, I'm just going to do a little plug with regard to the diabetes. That's our client today, diagnosed by her primary doctor with new onset pre-diabetes and, elevated blood sugar. She has some hormone issues, and we did some adrenal stress testing. We're finding her adrenals are really out of sync. She's under a lot of stress, and this actually has magnified her glycemia and sugar imbalances. And seeing her today is very focused. Same thing as you said, the diet, high in protein, fats, stabilizing the blood sugar, and we've even added in some adaptogenic herbs to help balance her stress response, and that in turn should also help. And again, fantastic information, and everything he's doing is scientifically based and is something everyone needs. And again, just a plug for the TNC. I've been using it for 5 months myself. A lot of stressors in my life, and it's completely balanced out my stress response. So along with that and chronic disease issues, it works fantastic. So a plug for that. And yes, with diabetes, if you can balance the stress response, I think TNC is a fantastic way, and it has the scientific backing. And, you can't go wrong with, adaptogenic herbs that have been around for thousands of years and used, even before conventional medicine. So this is the way to go. It's kind of like going against the grain, but it works. So that's my plug, and it's back.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Josiah. I know, let me give you a plug real quick. Well, I met Dr. Josiah actually when I had to go to urgent care for, I don't know what it was, a while back. And actually I gave him a packet of our product, and he ended up calling us and ordering it. Well, we've had conversations back and forth to find out that he's actually has started for quite a while now, his own functional medicine practice. And I know a lot of people out there are looking for good functional doctors, but typically you can't afford them because the really good ones are just off the charts expensive. Well, Josiah's got great rates, and if anybody is interested in functional medicine, why don't you give me your website?
Okay, holistichormonesolutions.com.
Perfect. holistichormonesolutions.com.
Mm-hmm.
Really appreciate it.
Not a problem, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, our next caller is calling from area code 603, ending in 2717.
Yeah, yes, Roger. This is Candace, and I'm calling from New Hampshire. I have a twin sister that is type 1 diabetic, and she has been for since she was 15. We're now 69. Is there any way that the pancreas rejuvenates itself to so that she can eventually get off insulin, or is it too late?
Well, there's a lot of controversy about whether you can actually get your pancreas to, start to function better on its own. But there's a lot of research shows that it doesn't matter so much if you eat a diet that doesn't require a lot of insulin. And so this is what's behind the big push on ketogenic diets, to where you're eating mostly proteins and fats for most of your calories and just vegetables, is that your body gets an alternative food source, and then it doesn't have to rely on insulin very much at all. And so I've read, different books. There's a book called The China Study, which showed people that even on, type 1 diabetics reduced their amount of insulin to such a small amount, it was like shocking to them, right? And I've read studies, I've read clinical trials that were posted on medical websites showing that by reducing the calories to a certain number per day and eliminating sugars and from the diet, people that were on insulin for 20 years went off of it. So who's to say? Even type 1 diabetics. So what you really want to focus on is not get caught up in the idea that I have to go off insulin, because obviously she needs it, right?
Right.
Focus on eating the healthiest diet and studying up a little bit on ketogenic diets, which is basically eliminating sugars, eliminating grains, eating beneficial fats and proteins, and a lot of vegetables, and see how when you drastically lower your body's requirements for insulin, how much healthier you get and how you regulate your sugar. Because the body can turn over to just burning mostly fat, but if you have too much sugar in your system, it can't do it. So you never know. She might be able to transform her whole system within a few months.
Well, she's very much a brittle diabetic. In fact, sometimes her husband has to get her out of a stupor, and we've lost her almost several times because she just bottomed out.
Well, this is someone that needs to go see a practitioner of functional medicine. She shouldn't be trying these things on her own because of her fragile state of health. It's great that we do calls and we do things on stress. We give people general information, but someone who's really sick like that needs to be under the care of a functional medicine doctor. And you can just go to, Google functional medicine, because she's in New Hampshire. Is that where she's at?
Yes.
Google functional medicine, and somewhere on that site there'll be a place to put in your zip code, and you'll have somebody right in your area you can get a hold of.
Oh, thank you.
And that's what she should be doing if she wants to change what's going on. Because if she bonks out that much and is always having those types of episodes, she's not on the program she needs to be on. She should be better than that.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. All right, Roger, we got one caller left in the queue. If you do have a question for Roger, again, *6 on your phone, you'll be put in the queue. But our last caller currently is coming from area code 281, ending in 2154. Call you online.
This is Anita, and I'm calling to ask, my husband is type 2 diabetic, and he was on metformin and glipizide, and through diet, we got him off the metformin. He's still doing the glipizide when he has a meal that is not all protein, and he does Inner Peace. I have also heard about something to take after a meal that wasn't all protein called Gymnema sylvestre.
Gymnema sylvestre.
Okay.
Yes. Gymnema works a little bit better if you take it before you eat.
Oh, it's before.
Because
So
it's supposed to. That's the one herb that they think might be able to regenerate some of these cells in your pancreas to produce more insulin. But there's controversy about whether they actually believe that to work. But there are a lot of anecdotal testimonials that people that use it regularly have better blood sugar levels. But it works a little better if you take it before you eat, so that it actually helps to your pancreas to start to produce a little more insulin before you actually eat your meal. And I also want to say it's hard on your system. Even your body will overproduce sugar if you're eating just protein in excessive amounts. It's okay in the training thing I'm talking about because you're regulating and changing your system, but you don't want to get into habits of just eating protein all the time because of your diabetes. You want to have more beneficial fats with it and some vegetables.
thank you. Do you know anything about what the glipizide does to the body?
No, I'm not familiar with that particular drug.
Okay.
Obviously, it's something about regulating your sugar. There's so many different drugs for it. It all depends on the doctor you actually go to. But work on it. If he's down to one and regulating with his diet, there's probably some things that he can tweak to actually make it much better.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Fantastic, Roger. All right, that was the last caller in our queue, and we'll wrap it up for tonight. But we're going to be doing these calls on a weekly basis. Again, if you want to hear these calls, the playback number for the following, this call for this next week until we record over it, playback number is 712-432-1085 with a PIN number of 881202. And you can also do a search on your iTunes for HerbWorks and get Roger's calls. So we'll be sending out a notification with the link to iTunes for that as well. And if you have any questions for Roger, you can go to our website at HerbWorks.com and ask us there. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks, Roger.
All right, thanks.